Hi, John here with another Indie Creative Journey, and this time I've got Bill Blankenship with his Kickstarter campaign. Before we dive into the story of the current campaign that he's working on, Bill, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're currently curious about. I understand that, you recently had something that kind of was really unexpected about, and I guess. I'm not sure if that's going to even be tied into a curiosity and stuff, but certainly I think that's something that I know that I can only imagine that being on your mind and stuff like that.
Yeah. Those sorts of things. I live in northern West Virginia, and as you know, lower class white areas are in the midst of an opioid crisis. I'm kind of used to getting news about dead friends at this point. It was actually the fact that it wasn't an overdose, that threw me off a little bit, but it was just right in line with exactly what the stuff I was thinking about at the time, simply because, I'm getting this book out and I'm promoting it partially due to mental illness and trying to have open and comfortable conversations about mental illness, so that we can end these stigmas. We can release this demon of shame in our culture about it, because I think that shame is the harmful element. It's the toxic element in the culture whenever it comes to mental health, mental illness, and the way we look at them. But yeah, got a little thrown off yesterday and obviously missed our appointment, but I'm really glad to be talking to you about everything, and I really appreciate you talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe that's a great starting point then, is what was it that kind of initially became that intersection between mental illness and really incorporating it into your art, and for that matter, kind of pursuing your art and stuff?
It was always a coping mechanism, art, but it was a means of getting validation at first. And as I got older, I saw how stories affected me, and I had experienced some things very early on that were very traumatic. Physically, emotionally, mentally, very traumatic, very, during the area of time where your brain is still deciding which neural pathways it was going to leave wide open, and mine were all neural pathways of fear. So I tended to sit in my room. I tended to isolate myself anyway. So I just had a lot of time to draw, and people would say, oh, that's neat. Oh, that's cool. So you got that validation from it. And then, you read stories that affect you. You read stories that make you cry. You read stories that you relate to. You read stories that, you make you go, oh my God, thank you. Somebody else feels this. Somebody else experiences this. And you see what a connection art has and storytelling narrative has in our culture, and how it's hardwired into our brains, narratives. It's the language of affecting consciousness.
Yeah, you're definitely speaking my language, with storytelling being a key way for, not, like you said, not only for us to connect, but also that we're hardwired to really empathize with the storyteller, and also different times as the storyteller to basically to share some part of us, like something that's really more universal or bigger than us, and so when people point to something and they say that's cool and all that kind of stuff, it kind of reminds me of I sometimes quote Liz Gilbert of Eat Pray Love, and she talks about how people used to point to something and say ole and stuff, and that was really Allah. They were pointing to something kind of divine, something that was kind of beyond themselves, and I think absolutely that kind of it's sometimes we have this kind of attitude that art has to be this kind of sacred thing and stuff, that it has to be like a Michelangelo thing and stuff. But absolutely, I think it's anything that really resonates with somebody, I think is art, something that kind of like connects us on a deeper level. Who would you say, or what would you say, like, were things that kind of inspire you to kind of go further, though, from the initial curiosity, from the initial, like, the etchings where you were playing to, like, then kind of
I
really
know exactly what it is, and it's why this is a father-son
awesome.
story. I remember being a teenager, and I'd run away from my mom's house, went to go live with my dad, and I was about 14. We started, experimenting with drugs, smoking pot, stuff like that, and got people would come over, the person who, oh yeah, like, hey, happy to see you because you're here with the pot, like, yeah, so they'd come over, and a little ritual of, like, everybody sits around the table, my dad rolls a joint, and he'd start telling a story, and everybody in the room was captivated with the way that he told a story, the way it was paced, the words that he chose, the emphasis that he put in, the way that, things rolled off your tongue at sometimes, and the way you pause right at the right time. He had everyone in the room, and I just noticed, like, this is how you control a room. You know what I mean? This is how you control a room. You know what I mean? If you can tell a story right, you can control a room. Absolutely. And yeah, but I had also obviously, was always into comics, and always was just coming up with my own stories. And it's like it was the story, like I was born with the storytelling filter, and it just got into drawing, so it was, the perfect art form that I admired and aspired to. But I also knew how you could affect someone else's consciousness with it. You can literally take someone else's consciousness through 5, 6, 7 moods in the course of a half an hour with a book, with a movie, you know what I mean, with an article. You can, and that's a power that I think is disrespected in narrative in modern culture, especially in Western culture, because it's all spectacle and it's all marketing-based storytelling, especially in comics right now. But you also see it in Hollywood, obviously. You see it on television, obviously. Marketing-based storytelling. You're where you see the purpose of it isn't to tell a story; it's to sell a story. You know what I mean? And that's where my frustrations lie. So I have no interest in being part of this industry per se, because as Groucho used to say, I don't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member, but it's some of the most, to see what you can do, that power to affect somebody else's consciousness, sold off, hoard off to the highest bidder, especially in some of the bigger companies. It's disheartening at best.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's on Medium. There's a couple of folks that were kind of having this discussion about this very idea, and I definitely plan to write about it soon. That like, and for that matter, I also wrote something on LinkedIn where somebody kind of said, like, he feels like that's the real choice, is like either to sell out or to basically pay the bills and stuff. And I think there's absolutely, like, a lot of in between, and I think
well, see, I'm ready to sell out. I am never the person to make fun of the sellout, because the people who make fun of the sellout are the guys who were trying to sell something that nobody wanted to buy. That's who makes fun of a sellout. Okay. No, I'm ready to sell out. I'm totally cool with selling out. Thunderchickens is designed to sell out. You know what I mean? It was originally designed to sell out completely, because Warner Brothers would have owned it if we would have won the contest. But that's a whole other story that I'd rather people not find on the internet. It's maybe I'll tell it to you. The thing is, though, it's got to mean something. I used all the visual cues of selling out, of making something marketable, make it cute, make it appealing to the eye, using all the symbol sets that the big Marvel movies are using, having analog characters, where I'm basically just stealing from them, but they can't get me for ripping them off. They can't sue me. It's built to sell out, but in there has to be a little part of yourself, and I put a few of my demons in it, and I put a few of my tears in it, and I put a few of my loves in it, and I put things in there that I was like, what? I was reading the Max at 9 years, no, 11 years old. I was reading Spawn at 9 years old. These were mature comics, and I was getting so much from them. And every time I would doubt whether I should be putting this in there, I would think, no, because I was dealing with this. Because there's going to be some kid that this is going to reach, and you can make it to where you can talk about mature concepts, but frame them in ways that children can understand. And maybe that's what we need to do in order to, evolve better, humans, make better humans, using narrative to hack the species.
Yeah, I think the thing, part of it too, is that we just before talking now, we were talking about the idea of 1,000 true fans, and I think really Kevin Kelly's thesis really is a sign of the times that we're past the mass market, we're beyond maturity of the mass market. We're at a point where you can find those 1,000 true fans of people that they not only kind of buy your stuff, but they love it. I mean, they're hungry for it. They're something that hasn't been touched on before, just wasn't really they weren't able to produce before and stuff like that. In other words, just go 10, 20 years ago. I mean, there was just no way that this a comic about superhero chickens that with dealing with mental illness issues would had been able to see the light of day, I think 10 to 20 years ago. But now I think it's very much that thing where it's not only something that can be done, but also probably needs to be done, because there's probably plenty of people that they want to shed light on these issues and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, can you talk a little bit about kind of what led to Thunderchickens? You had some inspirations from early childhood and stuff, and then what was it kind of how did things start shaping for the story, the concept, and
well, originally it was a pitch that was being done for a local community college newspaper. Never went anywhere with it. It was called the Thunderchickens, was their mascots. So I just changed it to the Thunderchickens because that reminded me of Thundercats and the Thunderbirds. Thunderbirds are go, Thunderchickens are go. I can just and I just started stealing little pieces from here and from there, putting it all together, and eventually I wanted to enter the Zuda contest in 2009, and I wanted to have a something that was marketable. And I remembered that old pitch from 4 years ago. And so I pulled it out and I brushed it off and I tightened it up and I made it into something that apparently after the fact had the largest lead of #1 in the history of the contest. Now, three weeks in, after being #1 for 3 weeks in, I decided to go out drinking, because I was with the third week standings had just come up, and I misinterpreted some things and ran my mouth a little bit, and we ended up having to pull out of the contest. The good end of that is I own this now. WB would have owned it before if it had won the contest. So yeah, from there, and I'd made an agreement with Chad that he had created some characters for another property of mine, special edition, and I said, well, why don't you take those characters and let me take Thunderchickens in full, because I was going to split the copyright with him for writing it, and I just started. It originally started as just a fun little all ages thing, and I was just like, but what if the villain isn't really a villain? He's just really mentally ill, and he's really trying to get it together, but he's just under stress, and he's making some wrong choices, and he just comes and it just reaches a breakdown point, a total breakdown, where this guy is dangerous. To talk about the villainization of mental illness, how easy it is to dismiss, how easy it is to villainize, how easy it is to make an evil in this world. Even still among the Christians, they touched by the devil, Dad, and got a little bit of the devil in them, that kind of stuff. So yeah, and then I originally made it kind of to impress my dad. I was like, hey, yeah, Dad, look, I'm doing something about dads and sons, and kept getting that you should get a real job stuff, and so I was like, I'm gonna put my frustrations with father-son relationships in here, how they're hard, how they're how they're combative sometimes, how they're challenging, how they can be caring, and yeah, and like even to the point of like at times you kind of have to like take that person out of your life for a little while just so that you can figure things out. um, I just started putting real things in there, and not questioning whether the kids would get it, not questioning whether, the kids would be able to process it, because I remembered what I was processing back then, what I was, getting in. But yeah, and then eventually, I had a daughter, my marriage fell apart with that, and I wanted to have something that like she could read and maybe understand me a little bit better.
Hmm.
Um, in the subtext. And so I decided that, I want to make this for her. I want this to be something that, cause she got a smart mom, a smart dad. She's going to be a smart kid. She can't have this, BS that they air on, Nicktoons or whatever. Not good enough for her. I need to get something that's marketable that, hopefully one day, maybe we can sit down and watch, an animated series of it, that actually respects the source material. The like the Netflix shows that they're doing with the thing. I was like, that'd be awesome to one day if I could like a 5 episode Netflix traditionally animated series of Thunderchickens, because it's something that kids would get into. It's something that adults would get into. Whenever I was like, I don't want to make this a kid's book. I want to make this an all ages book, and deal with really like with real problems, the real modern problems that we have. The media, is in there. There's a lot about how I see people becoming compliant and submissive in front of glowing rectangles.
Hmm.
There's a lot of stuff in there that is, that kind of speaks on like, corporate made comic books, and the bigger companies, and how it's it looks like, a camel, designed by committee, you know what I mean, like stuff like that, where it's absurd again, because it all goes back to storytelling, and it all goes back to art, and like the magic of affecting somebody else's consciousness.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that's amazing about really good storytelling, is that like there's so much that we can do to, but also like to really influence people in ways that like you couldn't possibly do with even like the best advertising. I mean, it's like, yeah, it reaches consciousness on a deeper level. It like I mean, if you want to look at the number one selling book, right, the Bible, I mean, that's like, the reason why it has moved masses so much and stuff for so long is because of the stories that are within it, that like just, even if you're not Christian, even if you're not religious and stuff, we can't but help be touched by, in some ways, the different stories that like, from there. And I think that's just a great example of how much we can influence people for good or for, we could definitely speak to many examples of evil as well and stuff like that. So
Oh yeah, I'd always said
yeah.
like there was always the argument, especially online, especially in online culture, of like the atheist versus
Mhm.
theist argument of how historical is the Jesus character. And I was always sided on it doesn't matter, because to me um it's the story, because I can tell you, at least a handful of movies, at least a handful of books that have like changed the way I thought about something. The Woodsman. The Woodsman is a fantastic film with Kevin Bacon that completely and totally made me rethink my villainization of pedophilia.
Yeah.
And seeing how this is, for somebody can be an obsession that they fight against. That yeah, the story is what matters, and yeah, completely agree with you that yeah, it's the narrative aspect um of religions that is the foundation of them. It's the structure with which they're all built on. So how important is story? And you're bastardizing it for like, because this is what you think is hot, like something with no soul, something that's like a totally like a golem, like a Frankenstein's monster, something that's alive and moving and affecting things, but that has no heart.
Mm.
It's just, it befuddles me. What can I say?
So in terms of the Kickstarter campaign, I understand that it's been underway. It's you're slowly making progress and stuff like that. Um, what would you say is like kind of been like the biggest challenge with getting it off the ground and stuff?
Um, a bad reputation. No, the biggest challenge with getting it off the ground is I mean it's fighting that doubt. You know what I mean? Fighting that self-doubt. And again, especially having like a very public failure attached to it, that haunted me. You know what I mean? And you know, 6 months of my life after that, I did nothing simply because of the fact that like it was just took it all out of me. You know what I mean? And you feel foolish and you know, like to have like it's right there and it's pulled right out from in front of you, you know, and you know, it just deeply affected me creatively. Um, and then yeah, like in the past year, a lot of it's just you know finding the time to do it, and then trying to get myself in a position in my life where I can have a consistency that is going to be necessary to fulfilling my obligations in it. And a lot of that has been, I mean, moving around. I've moved 12 times in the past 4 years. Um, yeah, yeah, to get the consistency and to slowly get enough together to where I think we could sell it on a Kickstarter. That was the biggest thing. But yeah, like as you know, it got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm ready. I'm as ready as I will ever be to do this. I have to pull the trigger. And then even then we weren't ready. Even then we revised the Kickstarter. We made it look better. And even now, I get talking to you before we went live about my friend who kind of ripped it apart. And I just kind of have to take it because she's ran several successful Kickstarters and knows what she's talking about. But yeah, like you keep taking punches. Like it's an uphill climb the whole way. It's whether you're starting on the first blank page or whether you're starting the Kickstarter or whether you're putting out the first volume or whether you're always going to be taking punches. You're always going to be like getting wounded, and you just gotta like take care of yourself and keep coming back.
So one of the things I hear is that you were really down and out after the initial failure and stuff like that. It really hit you hard personally and stuff like that. And then, but yet you came around and like you said, you somehow picked up the pieces. What would you say is kind of like, what has happened since that now, like kind of that's giving you the courage to kind of give it another shot? What kind of things has
I published an article on it on Bleeding Cool the other day called "How to Use Superheroes to Avoid Cult Indoctrination." It's my little gonzo journalism attempt at doing something like from the comics industry that's a little bend of Hunter Thompson. Because like I failing marriage after like losing in the Zuda contest and then that public failure, then failing marriage, then separations, and then divorce, and then just falling into substance abuse. I at one point ended up in something that very much resembled a cult, not like a dangerous Jim Jones style level cult, but like it scored very, very high. And I spent 11 months there without putting anything in me. And, before that, I couldn't go more than a couple weeks without at least, a beer, and then after that, it was off to the races. I met a lot of people there, learned a lot of things there about what I was capable of and about what I could make it through. And then after that, whenever I got out, I kind of set fire to my coloring career in comics, if you want to call it that. And made it so that like I just couldn't there was no way I was going to go back to coloring so that I could start drawing again so that I could do Thunderchickens. And over the past year I've just been taking rebuilding a drawing career from the ground up and working on getting this Kickstarter together on the side. So it's been yeah, you know, it's been completely totally connected to where I'm at in my life. I mean, I'm literally living the life that I like dreamed about 3 years ago.
Mhm.
You know, and it's not that great, you know, but it's so much better than it was, you know, before, you know, a lot of bad things. Um, that
Yeah,
you know, go ahead.
I get that sense though, like because also with the Kickstarter campaign, I have this sense that like you've kind of rallied around yourself, you know, like more of a community. I mean, granted, the community is still building, and that's really sometimes what Kickstarter campaigns are able to also do is kind of to introduce you to people that like they would never have heard of you otherwise and stuff. So that's like that's you know kind of sometimes I think what a lot of folks hope for, you know, before that, you also need to have some kind of you know like of community, something around you to kind of really to build off of. Like, can you talk a little bit about that, about how that kind of developed and what kind of things
Oh
has
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
you know,
I actively spent time doing free work for people.
mm,
You know, like getting them in my pocket. People that had more followers than me. I did, you know, some covers for their books. I built, you know, you know, repertoire and, you know, goodwill in these people that then I could then call on when I needed to start spreading the word on it. You know what I mean? And a lot of these people are just friends from the old message boards that we used to all frequent, the comic book message boards where we all came up, gave each other criticism. Where guys like Ryan Otley and the guy that created The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman, posted on one of them back in the
mm,
day. These cats used to post on the message boards that we all frequented. And now they're like the biggest things in the industry. Well, a lot of those friends, you know, a lot of those friends come from there, and you know, we were the guys that were, you know, disgruntled in the corner, going like, "Why aren't we getting the big gigs?" You know, and I was like, "Well, how can I could do it better than him?" You know, like so. But you know, over time, you see more and more of your friends succeed, and you know, and it inspires you to do what you're trying to do, and you know, some people have told me that what I do has inspired them, and you know what other people does inspires me. You have to keep this conduit of creative inspiration around you. You know, surround yourself with people who are doing things, interact with people who are doing things. Like, don't mess with people who aren't doing nothing. You know what I mean? Those kinds of people are just
yeah,
they're dead fruit. You know what I mean?
yeah,
um so yeah, building that that community and networking is important. Took me a long time, and not everybody made it. You know, like bipolar. You know,
mm,
not everybody's going to get through the filter. You know, but yeah, it's important to trying to do this, especially going it alone. Kinda, you have to have people that are in your corner, and I'm lucky to. I'm so lucky to. Some of these people have seen me at my worst. Some of these people, you know, they told me, I will not recommend you to editors because you are a liability. Like 3 years ago, that's
mm.
what they told me. Today, they're one of my biggest advocates.
Wow,
They're retweeting my stuff all the time because they see, you know, how I've had to bring it back from death's door, you know, and literally from death's door. You
mm,
know, part of one of the things that I left out was, yeah, just a little incident with a bottle over the head that you know, they were prepping the toe tags and the body bags on me, buddy, but you know, for some reason they sent me back. You know, I don't know why, but maybe it's something to do with what I'm trying to do.
yeah. It's funny. I was just listening to Adam Grant of the originals, kind of talking about this very idea, though, that like you know it's even like you know in The Godfather, right? There's the quote of you know keep your enemies close or you know, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer, and it's something about that about how often if you can turn around somebody who was actually an adversary at one point, that could be your strongest ally. It's just something even more galvanizing about it compared to people who you kind of just know and are kind of friends and stuff like that. There is some kind of unique
Oh yeah,
quality.
whenever I was in that cult, and
Mhm.
it was a, you know, again, I know that's a bit of a titillating word to use. They called it a group, a program. It was just very zealous about what they did, extremely zealous.
Right.
Um, One of the guys that I became closest to were the guys that I hated at first. Those were the guys that I made real friends with. You know what I mean? The guys that I hated at first, because I had to take a look at what is it about them that I hate, and how do I see that in myself? The things that I hate about them. Am I not guilty? Am I not guilty of the same things in this capacity, in that capacity? And they became the people that I was closest to, because they made me look at myself. They made me look at who I was. They made me look at my errors. They made me look at my BS and the way I could be better. Because I was just projecting what I hated about myself onto them anyway. So I definitely agree. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, some of your biggest enemies, might be your biggest allies one day. Because if they see, if they see what you're about, they know, what you were doing before they didn't like, but they see what you're about now, they respect it,
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is like your biggest hope for this campaign and for Thunderchickens? Like, what would you say is like if you had the Kickstarter was financially a success and like everybody kind of recognized it and stuff like that, and you got the support, but then what is it that like really, like, if you achieve that, then it's beyond even the money and stuff like that for Kickstarter, for the Kickstarter?
I mean, one is just getting the story told. The Kickstarter right now is for the first issue. And I've set it to where we're raising maybe a little bit more money than other people have tried to raise, but that's only to ensure that all of the rewards can be funded and we can get the issue made. And we're going to have stretch goals of where we, for less money, we can get the second issue made and released digitally through the reward, so that we don't incur any other costs above it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But repeat the question. Sorry, I got lost.
Sorry, no problem. Just basically, like, if you had, okay,
what my
financially,
biggest yeah, okay.
Yeah.
For me, it would be getting the story told and being able to get the story told and just get, maybe some validation from it, from some, I always say, like, I want them to say this was one of the top 10 books of this decade. you know, but yeah, like it's really, my goals are very humble. I just want to be able to make, a comfortable life, drawing these interesting little characters that I've grown to love. Like, this started off very methodical and very marketing based and and I've grown to like love drawing these characters. They're like, drawing these characters is the only thing that doesn't hurt, like so it's like, I want to be able to do that, and I want to be able to tell stories that people connect with in ways that they maybe haven't connected with the story before. I want to, be able to affect people's consciousness in a way that benefits them. Those are the things that I want. Everything else, I mean, like anything above that would be fine, but I if I could maybe use, if I could earn enough to maybe publish some of my friends who I think are great, but they, they don't have the right style, or they don't have, all the marketing bulls, yeah, stuff like that. I don't have like really huge dreams. I mean, yeah, one day, maybe one day, if enough people dig it, there'd be like a little animated series would be cool. That's, maybe that's a big dream, but I think that's possible nowadays. You know what I mean? Like, for how much of the stuff that we see now started on the internet, so I don't know, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with like what I want out of it. Something that I'm able to consistently use as a way of building a good life, and one where I can maybe take some of the stresses of being a freelancer off, because that's like one of my biggest problems. I work as a freelancer. It's a very stressful existence, and yeah, like needing to be able to kind of relieve some of the stresses, because like, how long can you do that before like something cracks?
Definitely. Awesome, Bill. Thanks for much for your time and learning about the story of Thunderchickens, and really I appreciate you kind of talking. I know, like, kind of this was, like a tough weekend just because of just the suddenness of what had happened. What's the best way for folks to kind of, follow you and kind of keep in touch and to, learn more about Thunderchickens?
Okay, well, obviously you can find it on Kickstarter right now, the Thunderchickens.
Yeah.
On pretty much all social media, I'm Madcap Comics, MADCAP Comics. Um, and that's on Instagram, that's on Tumblr, that's on Twitter, on Facebook. I think I'm just my name, but you can find both Madcap Comics and Thunderchickens pages on there. So yeah, like I try to be pretty easy to find, you know what I mean? Um,
The links, of
and
course. Yeah.
okay,
And then
excellent, excellent.
anything else that you want to kind of share about your journey, or any parting thoughts?
Um, my friend Dave Dwanch, I think he's currently the president of Action Lab Entertainment, comic book company I used to work for. He once said to me, Bill, your greatest strength will be your vulnerability. And at the time, I had no idea
Hmm.
what that meant. I couldn't be vulnerable. I couldn't risk being vulnerable. Being vulnerable means risking being hurt. You know, I
Yeah.
didn't understand it at the time, and I think I'm starting to understand what that means. And I think it's really important to art.
Yeah, definitely. One of the people that I really look up to for that is Brene Brown, who talks about it all the time. And her work was primarily just about vulnerability from a kind of almost scientific perspective and stuff. But then, since then, she's really talked about how for creativity, for art, it's just absolutely like a necessary ingredient. And to me, it's you know if art is about, and if creativity is basically creating the art that connects us, the only way that we can connect is by being vulnerable. I mean, if we have these shields up, if we have these faces of like who we are up and stuff like that, then it's really not only gets in the way, but I think it's almost impossible to kind of really be um, true to not only our art but ourselves.
It's impossible. It's impossible to be truly human if you're unable to be vulnerable, because the most human thing about us is that we're going to die, you know, and we have to learn to deal with that over the course of 60 some, 70 some, 80 some years, that we are going to end. Yeah, that's humanity, and that's the biggest vulnerability. That this doesn't keep going. This train is a short ride ultimately. So yeah, it's very important to art. It's very important to universal communications in art, and it's something that every artist should meditate on. But thank you very much for talking to me about everything. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad we could get together tonight. I think it's been a great conversation, and I really feel like I was able to say what I wanted to say.
Definitely, same here. Thanks again, Bill, and we will